Uh, I think my asteroids have gone freaky. Hello everybody and welcome to part 3 of the space construction tutorial in Unreal Engine or Unreal Engine 5. Really doesn't really matter where you make it. But in this tutorial we'll be focusing on creating the Saturn-like ring in our scene and also using Niagara system to generate asteroids, just like we did in the previous tutorial on part 2 where we used the blueprint. But this time around we're going to use Niagara, and that will come with its own set of benefits but also disadvantages. What you'll notice specifically with Niagara is that shadows aren't properly generated from these so-called particles. In essence, we are rendering meshes, but they don't cast any shadows within the world, so they would obviously look quite fake if they weren't in space. On top of that, the Niagara system does not use nanite meshes, so performance again could be affected. So it's really important that you use the right kind of asset when adding the Niagara, when adding the mesh to the Niagara system. So the more sort of poly count you've got, the more the performance of the scene will be affected. But what you're also going to find is that Niagara itself is very efficiently put together by the Unreal Engine team, so it's not so performant taxing as you might think. For all of those who would want to have this scene and use it straight away, you can go on my Patreon page where the project files can be downloaded, or on Gumroad. I have made the project files available for £3. Basically, you could go on Patreon and subscribe for 1 month and you get the project files, and that would help me a lot, support me a lot. Or you could just go on Gumroad and get it directly again for £3. I think it's I think it's the asking price should be quite okay for the amount of work that went into putting this together. But you'll get the scene with some extra features as well. These sort of nebula effects that I've been working on in the past couple of days, trying to sort it out. They're not yet finalized. I'm still working on developing that project. So on Patreon, I will be updating the project files with more improvements that I've made. There's also this sun particle as well, so you basically have like the sun, which is a Niagara particle system. The nebulas themselves are also Niagara particle driven. So again, I'm still toying out with the idea. I'm still trying to develop it, but I think it will go it will have some really good results in the end. But if you really, as I said, if you really want to support me, just head on there and get the project files. I think let's begin. So what we're going to do first is take a look at the current Niagara system that I have in place. Now, if I have a look in the scene, I can deactivate all the blueprints that I've created previously, and we've only got the Niagara system in the scene right now. And this is the Niagara system. Now, if you take a look at these asteroids, what you'll notice is that their shadows are not exactly accurate. And although I can't show you this right now, they are not casting any shadows within the scene. They are, however, as luck would have it, they are, however, receiving shadows from the planet. You can see here, right? So this is the planet shadow hitting them, so it does shadow them over there. Unfortunately, the ring itself is not being shadowed. I have yet to work out a solution for this. Please let me know if you have any ideas on how to add the shadow from the planet over into this translucent material for the ring. Now, the Niagara system doesn't cast any shadows, doesn't receive shadows properly, but it is far more easier to set it up for as compared to the blueprint. Now, if we bring back the blueprints into the scene, you will see that performance-wise, nothing really changes because these blueprints are, well, it has changed a bit, but not by a lot, considering how many meshes I've just added into the scene. But all of these blueprints, yeah, they're all nanite. So if I actually change over to triangles, you can see that they are nanite, but the Niagara system is not. So that's the difference. Right. Okay. Now we're back into the into our scene. Let us take the blueprints out of the equation again, and we'll focus over onto the Niagara system and how we can set this up. I'm going to do something different this time around, basically just for an easier way of explaining it, and also to help you to understand it further. I already have the system in place. I'm going to bring that over into here, the entire Niagara Particle system that I've created, and then we're going to create a new one from scratch that will basically replicate what we've done in the other one. Hopefully that will speed up the tutorial and also your understanding of what I'm doing. So yeah, let's move on to creating the Niagara Particle system. I'm bringing over the Niagara system that you are seeing in the scene right now. And in the content browser, I will create a new Niagara system. And from here, we just select new system from selected emitters. That's fine, but going for empty is what we need. And then just press finish. We're just going to call it NS Asteroid Tutorial, and that should be okay. And now we can double click it to open this Niagara system and just bring it over onto this side. And as you can see, there is really nothing within this particle system. One thing also that I want to do is I will be dropping it into the world somewhere, put its location to 0, 0, 0, and that will put it in the center of our world, which is fine. Let me just get this content browser away and now have our Niagara system in here. The first thing you'll notice is that the Niagara system that already exists has a mesh render, and it's using an asteroid. So over here, where we have sprite render, we want to press delete on the keyboard, and then we want to add a new render, at which point we select mesh render. This will then give us the option to add an array element. So if you press the plus button, it will create a new index. Let me just try and make this panel a bit smaller. I'm not sure why it's not allowing me to do that. Oh, there we go. So I've got the mesh render. Now over in here, I'm going to type in asteroid. Again, if you, whatever asteroid you've used, whatever rock you've used, pretty much you can just drop it in here from the content browser. The scale of the asteroid is going to be very important if you are working with large scale scenes. Now, in our over in here in the window, we can activate the preview if we want to. This unfortunately is not working very well, not very much in my favor, as I have got all these parts in front of it. So yeah, something like that. Hopefully we'll be able to see our particle system as it's being created. So again, this is all I need. I don't need to see any more information than this, at least not for the time being. Now, once we've added the mesh, which we've done that now, we need to start spawning our particle. So the emitter update is basically the section of the Niagara system that gives us things like what the loop behavior will be, the life cycle of the particles themselves. This can also help you to increase the performance of your Niagara system. So if you have a loop that just basically never kills the particles, just spawns them constantly and just keeps accumulating them, then your performance will tank at some point if the loop duration is too big. So in this particular instance, if I show you in here, it has a life cycle mode set to self, and we're going to do that in our own system. And then it just gives us a loop behavior, which we can leave at infinite. So basically this loop will just continue on going. It will have a duration. So after the timer has stopped, that particle will disappear and will be replaced with a new particle pretty much having the same behavior as the one previously. So we're going to set our loop in here, as you've seen, to 1000. Scalability mode to system. If you're seeing more options over on this side because I had the emitter update pressed. So I had the entire sort of empty selected. That's why you saw more options. But let's just have only the emitter update selected. There's nothing, I mean, if you see in here, we've got spawn count. So that's from spawn burst instances. That's basically from this option added in here. So we're actually going to press the plus button and type in spawn burst instantaneous, not instances. And what that does, it will basically burst into existence 4,000 asteroids. Pretty much that's what this has done now. It has created 4,000 asteroids, and the spawn time set to 0. That's fine. Then we have a spawn rate. So how many times you want these asteroids to? To be honest, I don't even think that this serves a function right now, but we will add it nonetheless in case we need it. But basically, I don't think we will need a spawn rate if we already have them spawned instantaneous, but let's just do it. So spawn rate set at 0.1. This, I think, I believe this ensures that we always have asteroids within the scene. Okay, now what we want to do is the mesh render in here. I've got the scale set to 25, so I'm going to do the same thing in here. So you've got to put 25 on each side, which this ensures that the asteroid that's now spawned into existence is actually the size 25. And you can see now that it sort of disappeared, but that's fine, don't worry. It tells us in here we've got 4,000 current asteroids generated, and the maximum amount that it can generate is 4,000. Now we want to go over into our initialize, into our particle spawn, and add a initialize particle. And over in here, we can set the lifetime of the particle. So we set it over to 1,000, so it lasts, I believe these are seconds. Then the color mode, I don't want to have a set color mode because we already have a texture on an asteroid, so that's fine. You can indeed set the color of this if you want to change the behavioral color of your material from your asteroid. So leave that to one set. Then over in here, the mass, we can use the mass, we can put it down, we can increase the mass as well. So at the beginning of the video, you saw my asteroid spinning like crazy, and that's because I have to do a calculation with the mass. So over here, you can see we've got 10,000. So I'm just going to set that mass to 10,000 as well, and because we're going to use this later on. And then so this is our initialized particle now set. We now want to add a location. This is basically telling the Niagara system how the asteroids will spawn within the scene. So I have used a Taurus as a location, and you can use other shapes as well, but Taurus is the one that works best for this. So I'm going to search for Taurus location, and what you'll notice now is if we look at the radius, it's quite large, and that's because our planet system is quite large. So we're going to go for 18, so that's 180, and then another 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And this has extended our particle by quite a lot. I don't even think we were able to see it anymore in here, but hopefully we will. And then we have a handle radius, which I've used a random range float just because it gives, more sort of a randomness to it, basically, as to where the asteroids sit within the Taurus width. So in order to change this handle radius to a random range float, you press this button over here, type in a random, and you'll see random range float. And this is between 10,000 and a maximum of 90,000. Again, all of these settings, you can change them to however, to your heart content. And that's basically with the location. Then I have apply initial forces, which I believe, wait one second, I don't know why I have two initialized particles. I may have added them by mistake, so I'm just going to delete that one. I only need the one that I've created already. So then apply initial forces. I believe this might come on its own with initial mesh orientation. I'm not sure. If not, we'll just add it ourselves. So we'll just do mesh orientation. So that's initialize. No, sorry, that's not it. Let me just, there we go. Initial mesh orientation. This just tells our Niagara particles how they're going to be sort of facing when they're being generated. So these parts here in the orientation, we leave them as there is. But then for the rotation, we want to change the rotation coordinates. So you first want to activate rotation and then change that to a random range float. And I've used -1, -1, -1, and then just 1 at the bottom, and that's pretty much it. There's no other changes in here. Now we go to our particle update, which is basically what creates the behavior of our asteroid field. So in the particle update, we have a particle state which is already predefined, and with that particle state we do we don't want to change anything, we just leave it. So it says here kill particles when loop is finished, so we'll leave it at that. And then we want to add a vortex velocity. This is what will give us the movement around the torus of our asteroid. Whenever you add one of these sort of velocities, like a vortex or a curl noise or whatever, they're going to come up with the module has unmet dependencies. So just press fix issue and that will resolve it on its own. So the vortex velocity, I've used an amount. I've used the random range float. So between 100 and 1,000, as you can see. And then I wanted to evaluate at every frame. So every frame, the Niagara system is looking at its particles and decides which number between 100 and 1,000 should the velocity be. This gives it more randomness as the scene goes on and on. The vortex axis, again, I have gone for random. Randomness is where it's your friend in here. So -0.2. Then I went for 0.5 and 1. These numbers, you will just have to play around with them for whatever works in your scene. By the way, this entire asteroid field thing is very much dependent on the scale of your scene as well. So if you reduce your asteroid Taurus to be smaller because your entire scene is smaller than mine, then most of these settings will have to be changed in accordance to that. I'm not talking about using random range floats or using different vectors or whatever. I'm just talking about the numbers themselves will apply differently depending on the scale of your Niagara system. Then we've got the solve forces and velocity. Now I have set some limits on the acceleration and the speed limit. I'm not really sure if this has even done anything, to be honest, but just do that. I didn't actually need it, but yeah, we'll just leave it like that. Then I've got mesh rotation force. So this is going to make our asteroids rotate. This is something that is not possible in the blueprint. Well, it is possible, but it's definitely more performance consuming. So in the blueprint that I've set together, the mesh rotation force, the blueprint itself wouldn't be able to rotate asteroids individually. It just rotates them around an arc, around a torus. But in this particular state, the Niagara system can rotate your asteroids as in their own orbit, from their own pivot point, which is quite nice. That's actually quite beautiful. So we're going to add in here a mesh rotation force, and again press fix issues, and this will resolve our issue. It adds the solve rotational forces and velocity automatically. And then with that added, I have gone once again for a random range vector, and 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2. And then again, every frame and the rest of it is, I've changed actually something here. I've gone for a lever radius. I can't remember why I changed this, to be honest, but we'll just have to, let's just do it. I'll probably remember later on, but yeah, I can't remember why I've done this. The lever radius centimeter. So it says here, larger values increase the amount of torque that's generated. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's why I clamped it, to be honest, because I think I was getting too much torque on rotation. But then we've got over here the solve rotation forces and velocity. So what I've done, I've actually changed this. So the mass, it's using the particle mass that we set previously, if you remember, when we went into our, I believe it was in the initialized particle. Yeah, so this is where we set the mass, if you remember, into our own emitter earlier. So that's fine. But then when it comes to the actual rotational velocity, I have changed that to a vector from float, and I've set it to 0.05, so then it limits the amount of time the meshes will rotate. If you don't do that, they'll just start spinning and spinning, and at some point, after the time has passed, they will spin at a crazy rate. Okay, so yeah, we're not seeing anything in this preview. We might as well just close it because the radius is so large. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the emitter of the original part that we've added, and I'm just going to look at our own. What I also want to do is I want to delete the asteroid field that we created that was existed in the scene already. So this is the one that we've just created, by the way. These are the settings. You've got to use the settings from within the Niagara asteroid system if you want to change anything about these. So in terms of their actual size, for example, we can go in here and we can change that maybe to 50. So now you can see we've got bigger asteroids. And for example, we can go into our Taurus location and just say, you know what, I want to move their position further out into the ring. And I want this to be increased, so I'll just do a 1, 0. So now our handle radius is larger. We can also change that to a 5, which then makes the minimum amount be smaller. But then why not just go for a 3? And now you can see what's happening. By the way, this radius goes on all axes. So you've got in here Taurus axis, so you can just change that to I believe you see what I mean. It just changes the entire how the Taurus sort of what's the axis of the Taurus, but doesn't change the axis of the actual of the handle. So the Taurus could be at 1. If you play with these settings, nothing will happen on the Z axis, but it's the actual the X and Y that would change how your Taurus sort of rotates. And that is really how you set up a Niagara system to create these asteroids. What you would do now is basically multiply this system that we've created, and then you would go over into our Taurus location, and let's say, for example, you add a 2, 0, so or more like 3, 0 might be too much actually. So 2, 4. And as you can see, this has pushed these asteroids over here. We could probably go over and change the size to something quite small. And then the asteroids are quite small. You can also go over into your vortex velocity and increase that to 5,000. Or let's try 50,000. But I've got a acceleration limit. So if I take that away, you can see that these sort of asteroids move very, very fast. There's some sort of abruptness to them, and that is mainly because we've got to maybe change over to spawn only rather than every frame. So what was happening earlier, because of that speed that we were trying to push it at, the Niagara system was checking every individual frame and moving the speed between 105 and 50,000. So the difference in speed was too big, and it was also looking at it every frame. Now, as you can see, our asteroids are pretty much propelling themselves around the Taurus, and that is mainly because of these vertex axes. So if you change these to be, for example, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, then none of this will not actually happen. But it's fun to play around with. So if we increase our mesh render to 25, now you can see that these sort of particles will go all around the planet, and that can actually play along for some really nice visuals. So if I switch over to this camera, you can see them. You can see the Niagara particles right there, or I can switch over to here. You see these cameras will then showcase where the particles are. Right, now one other thing that I wanted to just say, as I said to you guys, on Patreon or Gumroad, you can get these nebula effects as well, and that sun. And those, again, would be some interesting Niagara systems to have a look at. Especially the nebula is done in a very interesting way, actually. Where there's so I've used a tutorial from somebody else to learn a few tricks myself on how to create the texture In this case, it's a nebula sort of looking texture. So if I open that, you will be able to see it. This is the texture. So it's using this sort of texture to drive the color along this sort of shape in here of that texture. So there's a few things set up in here for that in the Sketchfab and how I've put this entire thing together. But again, I would actually expand on it in a future tutorial on this nebula of how I created it. So I'll expand on it in a future tutorial once I've fully ironed out the entire effect and you know, it looks the way I want it to look. But now, without any more delays, we've got our Niagara particles going, and they are stable in the sense of, you know, performance won't decrease past this point because it just won't go above the 4,000 particles that we've set. Well, actually now it's 8,000 because obviously creating 4,000 over here and 4,000 on this new system that we generated. But now let's move on to the ring. So I'm going to show you how to create this shape in Blender. I think this applies in other software as well, but I'm also going to put a link in the description below where you could get this mesh from Sketchfab if you want to, or again, if you want to get my project files, you can get the ring from, well, actually it will exist in the project files anyway. But yeah, we'll create this shape in Blender and I'll show you how then to set up the texture for it. And it's literally a drop-in mesh in here with materials. And then the material itself, not complicated. It's, you know, let me just make this a bit bigger. The material is simply a surface with translucent unlit mode. And it's got the texture, which is the texture you can get from the internet. And that's feeding into a multiply node with a number, which we can change to a parameter if you want to, that gives us the intensity of the emissive color. So I'm putting it quite low. Then we have a depth fade for the material. And what the depth fade does, it basically ensures that when an object is close to this mesh that contains the ring itself, then it fades. If you change that, I will show you actually now. If you change that to say 0 and apply it, what you'll notice is how the mesh, how the texture of the mesh cuts through our asteroids. It's not looking great. It's just not gonna work for us. But if we revert to the 10,000 that I've used in there, what you'll notice now is that it nicely fades in. You can see that. You can see it right over here. It still cuts through, but with a nicer blend. And you can increase that blend even further if you want to. I've just kept it at that level because it just, for me, it looked the best. Now, I'm also using an opacity. Just ignore this part. It's not important. I'm using the alpha of this texture, which, by the way, works regardless if your texture has an alpha or not, because it's using the black and white sort of it's using a value of brightness. So if it's black, then there's nothing there, and if it's got any kind of color, the pixels are lit, then it will assume there's something there to render. So again, I'm using a 0.3 number on the opacity of this, feeding into the depth fade and inside our opacity, which creates that effect, because I don't want my ring to be fully visible. If I switch it to a fully visible ring, then I don't know, I feel like it just doesn't work as well, and not if you get this close. If you're further away, sure, that sort of thing could work with no problem. But that's why I'm using a 0.03, I think it was, or was it 0.3? I can't remember. I should have just, no, it was definitely 0.3. So applying that will revert it back to what it was. Okay, so let's move on to the mesh creation for the ring. So in Blender, we will be doing this using a Bezier curve and a plane. The reason why we're using a plane is because the texture itself is quite, well, it's square. So first of all, go to the add menu, select mesh, and then bring in a plane. Add a new material to it. We'll just leave it like that. You can rename it to whatever you want. And over into the shader editor, we can drop down the texture that we've got of our Saturn ring and then hook it into the base color. And that's for us to be able to see the proper topology of the texture on the mesh. So that's pretty much done in that respect. Now with the plane selected, it doesn't matter if you have the plane selected or not, you can just shift A or go over to the add menu and go to curve and add a circle. Make the circle a bit bigger and also add a subdivision modifier to it and put it over to level 2. With the plane selected, you can add a new modifier, a array modifier, and then put it to fit length and leave it to 0 for now. Add a new curve modifier, and from the drop down menu select the Bezier circle that we've created. Now you can see that the plane is not properly sort of going around the circle. So if you go into edit mode by pressing tab on the keyboard, you can right click on the plane and then subdivide once, subdivide twice. Now if you press tab again, you will get out of edit mode and you can see the plane sort of following that curve. But it's very, as you can see, it's like it's made in sort of lines. So we can add a subdivision surface and push that over to level 2. And you can see that it's definitely a lot more, it's following the path a lot nicer. So you can put it to number 3 as well if you want to, which will then, help with the texture. And now in the fit length, if you add number 2 in here, you can see that it's generated a new, a new version of that plane, and it's basically merging with the other one. If you've got this tick box over here, click on it to merge the 2 planes together, and now you can increase the length to 4, to 6, to 8. To 10, and as you can see, it's not properly sort of linking over here. But if you go to 12, then it will. But you do have sort of this problem where you can see that, how they're not properly sort of aligning with each other. So what we want to do now is have a look. Is it 11.5 or is it 11.8? Which doesn't seem to really be bringing them in. It's just the 12 really that brings them in. So that just leaves us one option, and that is to scale the circle until they sort of meet like that. It's not ideal. I don't really like the effect. I'm just trying to unite them together properly, which is a bit of a shame that it's not just doing it perfectly. Normally, if you go and change the subdivision surface to simple, you no longer have that problem, as you can see. But it is not looking right. So what I could do is I could add the subdivision surface over into here, put that over to simple, and maybe put it to number 1 like that, and now increase the circle a bit more. And now they've merged and there are no longer any sort of cutouts in our shape. So this looks acceptable, I would say. Now you can go over here to these drop down menus and press apply a couple of times, and this will apply all the changes that we've made. We actually don't need the Bezier circle anymore because the plane is now done. And you can see there's a bit of overlap here, but that's fine. We do have a lot of geometry. You can actually, I believe, you can just right click it and then select unsubdivide, which would then sort of maintain the shape, but just reduce the poly count considerably, as you can see. Yeah. Let's leave it like that. Okay. So now we have our ring that we can then obviously export over to Unreal. There is the debate over the scale. So what I would say is when you want to, export this, make sure you go over to, make sure you select selected objects. I'm exporting as an FBX, and you've got this scale. Play with this number until you get the scale that you really want, but then you can upscale in Unreal Engine as well if you want to. So I'm just going to put that over to 50 and try and see how that looks like, and we'll take it into Unreal Engine. So in Unreal Engine, I'm just going to bring my content browser, and for the sake of the tutorial, I am just going to drag in the mesh over in here. Sorry, I think I've not... Oh yeah, there we go. That's the mesh. And it's asking me if I want to build nanite and stuff. I don't want to build nanite, just leave it as is, because this is going to be a mesh that has an opacity. So now, this is the mesh, which you can see, and I believe it already came with a material, but you know, we can double click it, and this is the material that it's automatically sort of brought in with that texture that we created. And if you looked in our previous sort of mapping, these are the nodes that we've used. I'm just going to copy them and paste them. I believe I've explained quite well why we're doing what we're doing. So I am just going to make sure that this is changed over to a translucent, unlit, two-sided, very important. Otherwise, when you go underneath your mesh, you won't be able to see anything. The texture won't display. And now we'll apply. By the way, you could beef up the ring, by the way, by creating 2 layers of it, you know, in Blender, to just and maybe merge them at the edges, at the outer edges, if you want a thicker sort of layer of rings. So now we've added the texture. Time to bring the ring over into the scene, and this ring is very small. I'm just going to make sure it's positioned in the center of the world. So that's where the planet is, by the way. That's the center of the planet. The center of the world is the center of the planet as well. And I'm going to increase that scale. Maybe I've increased it a bit too much. So this is too much as well. Let me just bring this over to a 6. No, too much. 2, 1. I think it's 1.5 that I would need. Yeah, there you go. I think 1.5 is the perfect one. Now, what you'll notice is that there is no sort of texture displayed. So let me just get this planet ring off, and our Saturn ring is not really displaying any sort of any information. So let's just have a look in our material in here, why that wouldn't work. So it's because we haven't actually put the opacity anywhere. So if you look on the over into here, our opacity goes into this multiply, and in our case we've actually have not put the opacity where we should have. So if I press apply now and we have a look, there's the ring, but the overlap is causing us a problem. This is not good. I actually did not anticipate that this would happen. So clearly, over in here where we've merged these together, right over here, we will have to do a bit of cleanup by the looks of it. So one of the things that you can do, by the way, in Blender is you have this option in here in the, I believe it was in here, yeah, in Tool, correct face attributes. So this will help if you start merging parts together. So I am looking at these sort of faces that are overlapping. Those, you know, the faces from. So the faces underneath are fine. It's just these overlaps that we've got here. Then we need to get rid of. You see that? So it's a bit of a hassle because you don't know if you are deleting the right part. You see, I've deleted that there. I still have so this entire edge, yeah. So if I then select, this is a bit of a cleanup that I need to do. So just to prove my point, basically, if I deleted all those faces, I've now got to connect these two, and as you can see, it's already sorry about that. It's already connecting them the way it should, but oh, look at that. So we're just gonna have to bridge these sort of two edges here, and then it would look okay. But you'll have to do this for every one of these, you know, so delete all the way to the end, unfortunately, and then stitch those together in here. There's a bit of a, I don't really like how the textures look like. I think it's a bit of a stretch, not a lot, but definitely a bit of a stretch here, unfortunately. So let me just see if that stretch can be resolved in any way. Yeah, I'm not really sure why it's doing that, why there's a stretch there. But you could go in the UV map and basically make sure that this entire slice of polygons, so all the way to the end, actually sits well within the UV map. What I mean by this is, if you go into the UV editor, you can see which slice that is, right, over here, and then you just need to be able to properly place it within the bounds of the UV. But that will fix that problem as you go. It's quite funny that you can't see it in Blender, but you can see it in Unreal Engine, the overlap. And well, actually, I do understand why the overlap is visible here. It's because of the opacity. Because in our material, which you can't find, right? In our material over here, we've got the opacity which is lower. So then it means that when you add two together, the same mesh overlapping itself, then you're basically increasing the number of pixels generated from each layer twice. So then the opacity is double, although we set it at 0.3. But I think that would be, as I said, just do a bit of cleanup there and that will be fine. But if you're still struggling with that, again, there is a link in the description below to Sketchfab where you can get this ring and just use that one if you were so inclined. But I thank you all for coming on this journey with me on creating a planet, solar system scene, whatever you may want to call it. I'm developing this, as I said, for a science fiction movie that I'm working on. So none of this is finalized. There's other improvements that can be made, which I will definitely be making going forward. If you want the project files, again, go on Patreon and you can get the project file from there, which gets updated as the actual sort of as I said, as the project sort of develops. I also want to thank Valentine Danclaude, I hope I said that name properly, and Adam Smith for being supporters on Patreons. Like I've said before, I'm going to add people into basically the end credits for each video that subscribes to my Patreon. And also I am listening to Patrons for direct feedback and requests. If you guys want me to help you with your own project, I actually do offer quite a bit of let's call it counseling, but tutorials in general. So message me, even go on Gmail and send me an email. If I find your query interesting, then I will definitely give it an attention, maybe a video. If I can help you by giving you a comment, a feedback, a short video back of how I would resolve something, just please go ahead. You'll find that information in the description below. So I really am glad that you guys followed this tutorial. I think it was quite popular and it's quite good. I've learned a lot and I'm still learning. So I'll see you guys in my next tutorial, hopefully not too far away in the future. But yeah, keep creating and keep being, how should I say, innovative. But yeah, the more you make, the more you create, the better you'll be at it. Thank you.